Hello, everyone. How's it going? It's NewBeat here, along with Aero, Tikatee, and Ageless, as we're getting ready for episode 2 of Recall. How's it going, guys? We got our first weekend of Overwatch League in the book. We have a new patch to talk about. There's all of a sudden a whole bunch going on in the Overwatch world.
Yeah, this weekend was super exciting. I think if my memory serves correctly, at least from my own predictions, this was like probably the most upset heavy opening weekend that I remember, at least. It was really interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of changes coming into this year's league with Overwatch 2 and all the team roster changes and all that kind of stuff. So I was definitely expecting chaos, but there was probably more chaos than I was actually expecting this weekend. It was awesome to see.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that this is a new game. You know, there's the flow of all these, the matches and everything. The pace is so different. You can tell like all the teams are learning new stuff. Everyone playing the game is learning new stuff. It's just a whole different structure, and everything's different, and it's nice. It's refreshing, and watching the matches, it definitely felt like anything could happen, and I think that's really good.
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Aegis.
I was going to say, just some of the expectations were subverted pretty substantially, I think. We saw, NYXL kind of struggling really, really hard early, and I don't know what that means, honestly. It seems like everyone has an idea of what that means, but Glads looked really strong on that first day, especially.
Yeah, for sure. I think the one thing I could say for certain is all of these teams are going to look completely different by the end of the season, and all of these teams are going to look leagues better than they did this weekend. So if any fans of any struggling teams need some copium, this is as if it's like season 1 of the Overwatch League. It's a brand new game. We got brand new maps, a brand new map type. There's so much new going on. It's going to take a little bit of time for these teams to fully find their flow, find their sort of team dynamics that they're looking for, and really learn the ins and outs of this game.
And speaking of ins and outs, like right now the Overwatch League is still playing on the previous patch, but there has been a new patch for Overwatch 2, so a couple adjustments going on. There was a change to Sojourn. Wrecking Ball's back into the game now after causing everybody to crash just by slamming the ground, which is definitely overpowered. Any things that really stuck out to you guys about the newest patch notes?
Zen?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Zen is so fun. I think that's
Zen
one of the
hilarious.
bigger ones. Curious if this one's gonna stay, but Zen he has 25 more HP now, and then which is a shield HP, by the way. And then he also has the new kick, snap kick. So his quick melee does more damage and knocks back enemies significantly, which is pretty funny because it makes it way easier and really hilarious when a Genji tries to jump on you or a Winston jumps on you and you just kick him away, just kick him off the map, and you get out of here. It's really fun and it's really interesting. I don't know if it'll stay. It seems kind of silly, but
honestly,
I like it.
It feels kind of like an experimental patch. Like,
yeah, it feels like something a fan suggested. The only problem I have with this change is like they introduced 2 buffs that I think are intended to solve the same problem. And while it is fun, I think it's leaning into the department of like over tuning for one significant problem, which is Zen's having a hard time when he gets dove, which arguably he should, given that he's like the highest DPS output support in the game. But they gave him extra HP, which 25 HP might not look like a lot, but it is pretty significant in Overwatch. It breaks some damage thresholds, like, for example, Cassidy can no longer headshot, body shot, and kill a Zenyatta, which I found out on stream very frustratingly. And then they introduced the kick, which again does more damage, and the knockback to, again, give him an easier time when getting dove. Arguably better time against individual targets specifically, like you said, against a Winston, people with limited one-time use mobility just get absolutely shut down by this kick when they dive him. And I mean, you've probably seen it in your quick play games already too, but like there's some pretty funny interactions where Zen will just like kick you into a corner, or like if you're chasing a Zen like around a corner and he just kicks you and lines up the headshot. It's interesting. I don't necessarily like the direction that they, again, in theory, might have overtuned two things for the same problem, but it definitely makes the character more fun to play in the beta right now.
It reminds me of when they introduced Diva Remech doing damage for the first time, and it's like this really silly interaction where you can just get these insta gibs for no reason.
Yeah,
It's really funny, but
that was a really fun week where like every fight there was a baby diva trying to run into the backline just to squish everybody. And for like the first week it worked. It got really irritating, but maybe it'll be the same way. Like it'll kind of even out. Like I know yesterday playing with Harvester, we were doing stuff and like kicking like an enemy player into other abilities. So like they get kicked into a boop and then go flying off the map or stuff like that. So for me, it was really fun, and I hope it sticks around. And maybe once people kind of get used to it being there, it won't seem as strong. But that remains to be seen.
The
Yeah,
extra
sure.
health on top of it is really kind of interesting. Like, yeah, Zen is the epitome of the glass cannon. Like that's the entire hero is the glass cannon, and now it's just kind of a cannon.
Yeah. Remember? So a quick reminder too that like in the original release of Overwatch 1, Zen had 150 HP. That's how that's how threatening this hero looked, because just like Tracer has lower HP and Widowmaker at the time also has at 175 HP on live, they lower the HP pools to make characters more vulnerable when they are capable of such high damage. They didn't nerf Zen's damage in any way to compensate for his now tankier playstyle, and I don't think Zen's going to be played any differently. You're not going to like Lucio speed a Zen into the enemy backline and go for kicks or anything like that, although we should definitely try that. But strategically, like the hero is just way better than he currently was, just from that added survivability and no loss from his damage potential. Seems a little bit much.
yeah, I agree.
Oh, we'll see.
One of the I want to jump to one of the other characters that got changed, and that's Roadhog, because this was a significant one.
Right.
They changed the way its ultimate worked. So it used to be Whole Hog used to be just a channeled one where you hit it once and it's just going to go the whole time, and you can get interrupted from stuns. But now it's no longer a channelable; it's a transform ultimate. So it's like a tactical visor or dragon blade, where it just changes the way he operates. So now you have to click to be able to do your shot from the ultimate, from the Whole Hog, and it means that you can use normal abilities without canceling Whole Hog. So you can start Whole Hogging somebody and hook them back in, then re-Whole Hog them back into a wall. You can run around a corner and use your health regain, which you couldn't do before. So when Roadhog was ulting with Whole Hog, he was one of the most vulnerable characters in the game. But with the change now, it's a nice quality of life, but I'm going to be honest, guys, I don't think it changes much about Roadhog.
He's unfortunately still Roadhog, huh?
It shows how far Roadhog has come, right? He used to be able to not move and heal at the same time.
Yeah.
And now he can stop ulting, heal, and then go back to ulting. And yeah, I don't think it's gonna make him any more viable at the higher levels.
I'm a big fan of putting more control into the player's hands, so like making this ultimate more user-friendly. And it does make a few interactions, like you're saying, like if Ryan puts up a shield, you could just like break the shield and then hook him and still Whole Hog him or something like that, or Whole Hog to like bait out Genji's deflect and then not kill yourself with the Whole Hog is a nice touch. But yeah, like you said, I don't think it changes too much at a competitive standpoint, just a little bit nicer to play.
Have they patched the like infinite speed?
Fire rate?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
For,
'Cause
like-
that was gross.
Yeah, for like a day they had that in, and people were like mouse macroing, one-shotting people, farming Twitter clips.
Yeah.
Myself included.
It was so ridiculous. It was just like
Yeah.
infinite DPS.
Yeah, that's
But
the buff
you know what?
Hog needs to become viable.
I was gonna say, yeah, like they might be onto something. Like the ultimate is so useless. Basically, I guess now it's a little bit less useless. But I almost wonder if like just ramping up the DPS to a stupid amount is what is needed. I don't want it.
Yeah. Okay, I can't imagine quick play games if that remains in the game. That would be a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Oh god, there's
Yeah.
already too much hog.
Yeah.
I
Other
think
than those
another
two. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I think another patch that's gonna be interesting is the extra knockback for the Wrecking Ball. Like I know tanks take less knockback now, but it's pretty much back to where it was when Wrecking Ball was first introduced, and everyone thought his knockback was way too powerful then. So it'll be interesting to see how strong it is now with that tank passive that all the tanks have with the reduced knockback. But that's another one that I'm gonna keep my eye on for sure.
Yeah, I think that one primarily just makes it easier to hit the double boop tech, which is pretty tough to do.
Mhm.
So it makes that grace period a little better. But yeah, that'll be an interesting one because I think the Wrecking Ball mains, the ones that no life Wrecking Ball are just absolute gods, probably love this a lot. So
Yeah, they'll probably find some interesting stuff. This is
Yeah.
really good. I've noticed. So like, there's a lot less situations where you'll have like in Overwatch 1, you'll have like 6 people on like Route 66 gas station or something, and then the Wrecking Ball will come and boop all 6 people off the high ground. That doesn't really happen in Overwatch 2, not only because it's 5 vs 5 now, but because people play a lot more split from each other. A lot of people aren't as reliant on like an anchor tank shield or things like that to hold positioning. So there's a lot of situations where Wrecking Ball can find more 1v1s. And I think where this tech is going to be most applicable, or this change is going to be most applicable, is for like further isolating individual targets. Like the boop distance is pretty significant, and I think you'll be able to find some new interactions, like not just like the big 5k environmental kills and stuff like that, or the double, triple, quadruple boops on a single target, but like actual potentially useful stuff where you'll boop someone into a corner or around a corner, past a choke point, stuff like that, a lot more consistently with this knockback change.
So
Definitely
with
some
that,
potential.
I think we should head over and take a look at what happened this past weekend in the Overwatch League. A lot of interesting results came out. Like Tikatee, you mentioned how there were just so many different upsets. And with that, what is the result here that kind of leaps out at you the most when looking at the scoreboard?
There's so many. I mean, the obvious one for me is still Houston over Dallas at the homestand.
Yeah.
Like that was such a dominant performance. And then the turnaround to Dallas 3-0ing Washington and then Houston losing to Toronto the next day, it's like it's chaos, right? And again, we know that the first games are going to be chaotic because people are still learning, people are developing strats and stuff like that. Nothing is set in stone yet. Like I said, it's going to be completely different, potentially even next week, but especially towards the end of the season. But it's so interesting to see such volatility in both of those teams, both Houston and Dallas, from one day to the next.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's is so crazy because you think of how Dallas ended their season last year. They were the team that was extremely fast, controlled the tempo, that had control of the series from start to finish. And here in this one, it was completely flip flopped. I mean, this was a home stand, so this was a live event. And so you had it was technically a Houston one that was in San Antonio. So there was more Houston fans. There definitely was a little bit of momentum, and a lot of the Dallas players talked about nerves. But when you look at how Houston played that map for probably every single match for the whole thing, I would say that this is the cleanest I've seen any team play, the most coordinated. Because when you look at 5v5 in this new game, basically, that people don't have a firm grasp yet on how the flow of the game should go when you don't have that off tank. It's obviously very still, developing. And the way Houston was able to control things with Pelican and with Dante being the only DPS player to be in the tank role playing Doomfist, right? I don't think any other DPS has done that this week. And it's actually pretty wild how coordinated Houston was. And I think it highlights how insane Pelican actually is. If you didn't know how good Pelican is, watch that match and you will see how insane this guy is.
I think the biggest thing that solidified in my brain, because like after the first day seeing New York underperform with Yaki on the Echo, I was thinking to myself, like, is Echo like a crutch for them? Like, is any team actually going to use Echo? And then Houston not only showing the rest of the league how to play Doom, also Pelican showing the rest of the league how to play Echo in these compositions was incredibly fun to watch, number one, but also like such a dominant performance. What I've been saying on stream is like it looked like Houston Outlaws is the only team in the league playing Overwatch 2.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And the fun thing is, they didn't even only run this style. You know, they ran this on the first two maps, and then Dorado, they completely changed their style.
Mhm.
Something that not many teams are doing, running the Ash and running Pharah defenses and this kind of stuff. And they're able to still completely obliterate Fuel on that map. It's pretty crazy how clean they looked. And this match, I think, is that biggest upset that most people would look at when looking at this, because first of all, you don't expect Houston to win at all, let alone it be a 3-0. So it's pretty extreme.
For
I was
sure.
really
Yeah.
I was really happy to how good Merit looked, because Merit's someone like we've seen in contenders for a long time in Korea, and Merit just coming out that first day and crushing it on the soldier was just really fun to see, and it always makes me happy when those contender players come up and really like bring the goods.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I mean that's been a thing for not even just Houston too. There's a lot of contenders players that were in contenders last year that come into the league this year that are doing incredibly well. There was a list somewhere. I probably should have pulled that up. But I mean, you think about who were all the crazy. I mean, it looked like Sam and Finn, for example, on Shock. I mean, we'll probably get to the Shock game soon, but just another example of a couple rookies who are absolutely doing insanely well in this first week of Overwatch League.
I think one of the bigger things too, like we talked about upsets, but one of the big question marks coming into this weekend for us when we were making our little tier list last week was whether the Shock were going to be a top level team.
Yeah.
And granted, they had some relatively easy matchups this week. I think they showed that they're still a clean playing team. And I think they also showed a little bit of flexibility in their roster, both in their Paris games and in the London games. They weren't just like one tricking Soldier Genji and stuff like that, you know? And all of their players, I can't think of a single player on the Shock that looked like a weak point. Arguably, Kaluge in the first map with his Winston play, I had some questions about, but he definitely cleaned up in his London match and the next matchup there over the weekend. And overall, like every single player on the Shock looks really solid, and it's really going to come down to when we actually see them get tested, maybe this next weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, Paris and London are kind of the low-hanging fruit of the league. If you're Shocked, these are teams that you should beat right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Paris does look a little better than I expected them to. Granted, they only won one map, and I have kind of low expectations for them. But like you said, Shock had a lot of question marks, and I think the real test is going to be next week, because the rest of their schedule is not easy. It's not against Paris and London anymore. You're facing the Gladiators and Dallas both, I think, coming up soon. So
yeah, it's going to be a hard week.
The strength of schedule absolutely skyrockets, and Shock, I think, was a very pleasant surprise, and specifically Sam. Sam is one of those where we talked about the rookie coming into Overwatch League. It's very different, and this guy absolutely played out of his mind, and I think he shut a lot of people up who were doubting him and doubting his ability to be able to play in the league. And even though it's Paris and London, he still played phenomenally, and it's really exciting to see how well Shock could do with basically a brand new roster.
Yeah,
I think
for sure.
I think basically the bare minimum for Shock in this first weekend was to win 2-3-0s. Like they couldn't really even afford to give up maps. Obviously they didn't, and like they look good for the most part doing it. So that is something that really is going to help the Shock stock go up going forward. The one question I have from the weekend is, like, we kind of talked about Houston and how they looked decent in this first weekend, but they did lose to Toronto in the end, which I think some people definitely saw as an upset. Like I personally was happy for Toronto to come back and take that match, but I really think it was when Houston let slip away.
Yeah, I'll agree with that pretty heavily. Toronto was adapting their style to go off of the Soldier Genji into the Soldier Tracer, and using the Tracer to control a side angle that like an off tank normally would, and to see them be able to control that tempo, specifically on control maps and push maps. Toronto controlled the tempo the whole time for those maps, and Houston obviously didn't have an answer for it. And even in the very last map of the series, the game 5, Houston looked lost against the Tracer.
Yeah.
But when they played on those more structured, straightforward maps, the escorts and the hybrids, I mean, Houston looked so good. It looked like they were going to win the series 3-1. But Toronto, I was really impressed with Toronto's ability to abuse Houston in that setting. And the real question is going to come to, is that going to be something that is going to bite Houston going forward for other teams? Because they look so good in situations where they can control their own pace. But when one of those side angles gets shut down, for example, how Toronto used the Tracer, they kind of flounder. And so this question mark now going into next week is, number one, can Houston shore up those weaknesses, especially on the hectic map styles, the controls and the pushes? And can Toronto play against the teams that are doing Soldier Genji? You know, I mean, we saw them lose against Washington, who was doing the more standard version, but they only beat Houston, who's forcing the Ekka. So, you know, that's Toronto going into next week is going to be a really good one to watch out for.
Yeah, another one of those sort of like middle of the pack teams who I think we could say exceeded expectations a little bit, but it was definitely, like you said, more of Houston underperforming. I just want to highlight too how poetic it was that we went to New Queen Street, and that's where like the momentum shifted in Toronto's favor. They got like the home field advantage in the curling rink and then just took it home. I think that was great for them. And exactly like you said, I'm worried for Houston that Dante's Doomfist is a little bit of a crutch. Obviously, it served them extremely well in their matchup against Fuel. But like you said, as soon as they swapped onto that more tracer-heavy playstyle, and they were, I think, flushing a lot of pressure away from Dante and not being able to find those clean initiations with the Doomfist. Don't get me wrong, his Doomfist is amazing, but he's not an unpunishable character. And faster-moving characters like Tracer, who are able to mark him, force some cooldowns out early, I think started taking the momentum away from Houston, and it doesn't help that the last two map types were Push and King of the Hill, which opened themselves up to that Tracer play, opened themselves up to that flank style play, and might make it easier to abuse something like a Doomfist for the team, for Washington, sorry, not Washington, for Toronto, looking at that match. And it's like Toronto just like found the keys and they just unlocked Houston and they're ready to counter it every time. Like you said, whether or not they can take Hey, sorry, my Discord just disconnected briefly. But yeah, it's going to come down to whether or not these players are able to adapt to a more meta and less kind of rush and linear playstyle that Houston was playing.
Yeah, I want to shift over a little bit to talk about Vancouver. Okay,
Yeah.
we're going here now.
We knew this was coming.
So here's the deal. I think everyone kind of collectively agreed that the teams that look the weakest are London, Vancouver, Boston, just on paper. And going into this week for Vancouver, you're playing against both London and Boston. For all three of these teams, these are the matches you have to win for you to have a decent looking first qualifier. And Vancouver, while they looked okay versus Boston, I will say that match was extremely messy. And this kind of play is the one that you get that feeling that this is a bunch of people playing Overwatch together, and you don't see the high levels of coordination that you see from like the Houstons and the Atlantas and the Shocks, and to see Vancouver lose to Boston, even though the series was kind of close, but then get decimated by London, and London is playing a composition style that is not necessarily meta, and they're basically only playing one style everywhere they go. It's very predictable, very readable, and Vancouver did not have any answers for it. And that is a very, very, very worrying thing for a team going into week one, to lose to both of the teams closest to your estimated skill level. I mean, this is one of those, though. I mean, you can argue that they'll develop, throughout this qualifier and throughout this tournament, but these are the ones where your strength of schedule is as easy as it's going to get this week. So going forward, it's only going to get harder. And if they don't clean up some of these coordination issues, and where there's a lot of staggering, there's a lot of losing the 1v1s that really shouldn't happen as often as they do. And I'm worried for Vancouver, guys. I got to be honest. I am worried for their season after seeing their week one.
Yeah. The match against Boston there, I think made me really hopeful for Vancouver, because they were going pretty much toe-to-toe for Boston for most of that series. And I think there were a bunch of standout performers on Vancouver. Massa, definitely worth highlighting. I don't think anyone was doubting his ability, but he definitely stood out to me on the Vancouver roster as like one of their solid playmakers and initiators, which you don't usually say about a Lucio. But looked really strong on a lot of their individual play. And like Seiko had some pop-off moments as well. Lots of things to highlight from Vancouver, but then come the next day when they're playing against London, again, like you say, like one of the more predictable bottom shelf teams, they absolutely folded. And like you said, we saw like, did London play like exclusively Reinhardt in that game? Like exclusively Hottie Reinhardt?
I'm pretty sure they did.
I only remember Reinhardt, but I know there was some matches where they swapped to like a Winston in specific situation. But yeah, like it's just a completely different paced game, and it's something that clearly Vancouver wasn't ready for, but that's not really an excuse when you're in the Overwatch League. It's not like this is collegiate and you're only good at one style or against one style, or maybe even like open division, maybe contenders level where you have like a niche that you fill. This is the Overwatch League. You're playing against the best teams in the world, and you need to be able to adapt on the fly to different threats that you're coming up against. The fact that they seemingly, like you said, had no answer and seemingly made no changes to their playstyle showed a little bit of lack of depth in their roster at the very least.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, and maybe this is me being critical, but as a coach, you know, as a former coach, Overwatch League coach, is they had 2 days to prep for this. And it's not like...
And they saw London,
Yeah, London showed exactly what they were going to do against Shock and did the same thing over and over and over again. And it was very clear that this is the style that they're going to stick to. I mean, it's so obvious. And just not have what it seems like not having an answer. Maybe they did have an answer that wasn't obvious, you know, that a lot of people couldn't tell, that just didn't work. But you know, like you said, this is predictable bottom shelf team with their play style, and not having an answer is very troubling.
And like you said, Aero, I've looked forward through the rest of the kickoff clash, and they do not have any more really quote-unquote easy opponents left. Like they're playing like the Shock and the Atlanta Reign. And I was kind of looking through, like hoping maybe they'd get like Paris. I feel like that would be the next team where they might have any kind of a shot. But yeah, they got tough opponents the rest of the way in this tournament at least.
Yeah.
It's hard to say who's not a tough opponent. Like we said, we saw a lot of chaotic matchups, but like I could see reasons to put almost like more than half of the Western teams like in the finals of that kickoff clash. Like there were shining moments from every team, almost every team, obviously, like we're saying now. But there's less and less of a clear divide between the top level teams and like the mid-level contenders that are maybe overperforming, maybe underperforming on any given day. It's definitely too early to say who the best teams are.
I think one of the other stories we kind of got to talk about is the Gladiators. Gladiators and the Reign, I think, both had similar weekends in that both teams played well. They were against opponents that they should win against on paper. Gladiators, I will say, they looked good, and I was very up on the Gladiators, and I think they still are going to be contenders for finals. They still are there. I wasn't as impressed as I was hoping to be, but that's not saying that they're bad by any means. I think, you know, they're still top 3, but I wanted them to be completely dominant, you know, and I hope that going forward for these next couple matches, because if I remember correctly, they also don't have you know, super easy matchups going forward. They're at similar skill levels to the teams they're playing, or projected skill levels. And so I want to see how Gladiators pushes themselves going forward, especially with the play styles that they're going with.
I think, so you mentioned there, Gladiator played some decent teams. This might be a hot take, but I think New York this past weekend was my #1 pick for worst performing team based on where I had expected them to play. I think they played abysmally, and I didn't understand a lot of their core compositional game plans and stuff like that. Like they were playing, I remember Circuit Royale. They're playing Circuit Royale offense against a Sigma, and they're forcing a Widow matchup, and their take is Zarya. And they're forcing Yaki on Echo to go like solo aggressive, and Yaki like wasn't even getting bubbled. And it just led to so many situations where they just fell flat because they were forcing so much playmaking onto their DPS. but the opponent's tank, the Sigma there, was easily shutting down any space they were trying to take. And I don't know, it just seemed really, really poor. In addition to that, I'm remembering something else now. In their first matchup, where they played Queen Street, they were one of the teams. I had a beef with a couple teams. I'm gonna rant for a little bit. On push maps, and the casters even pointed this out at one point. On push maps, PSA to anyone watching, you only need one person pushing the payload for it to reach maximum speed. It's not like Escort or Hybrid. It moves at a set speed no matter how many people are on it. In like 5 fights in a row on New Queen Street, New York had like 4 or 5 members pushing the payload, and they just didn't take good macro engages. They didn't take setups around like the obvious choke points and obvious angles, and they did nothing in terms of map control, and they predictably lost those maps. And it was really annoying to see these Overwatch League teams who are supposed to be performing at the highest level just ignore parts of the game. You know, it's like it looked to me like they just never practiced push. And that's just, that grinds my gears.
Now I'm just having a fun mental image of Tikatee sitting at home yelling at his computer. Like,
you could ask Aero, we were on a call.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what was happening. What I'm picturing is exactly what was happening. That's good to know. Honestly, I don't think that's a hot take at all. If anything, I think that's a very New York Excelsior thing to do. Like, it just seems like they've had good moments throughout the history of the Overwatch League, but it always seems like when you really expect them to be good, they just aren't. And so when it happened this weekend, I was like, yeah, that's what NYXL kind of does.
It's on brand.
Exactly.
Their intro video for the players was still the best in the league, though, I will say.
That's what New York does.
So
they always have the sickest
consistent.
intro.
Yeah.
Is that the one with all the different like player poses they were talking about?
Yeah, and they were like zipping around the city, and they were like, yeah.
Yeah, well, at least they got one thing going for them, that can't really play push good player videos. So I mean, it's, you know, it's a give and take.
Give and take, yeah.
So,
They also had like pretty rough opponents to start off too. Like, oh, here's your first
sure.
2 matches. You get to play the Gladiators in the rain.
yeah. Exactly.
Oh no.
To be fair, they can only go up from here. I mean, unless you're playing Dallas and Houston. What's their schedule look like for New York? But yeah, having to play Atlanta and Gladiators in the first week is definitely rough. And I think they probably end up 0-2 even if they looked good. But they did not look that great in this match. So
Left a lot to be desired.
yeah. I mean, Atlanta's one of those other teams, though, that is playing primarily Doomfist.
Next week we should see them get at least one win because they are playing Vancouver next week. So.
That'll be their test.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, if they lose to Vancouver, sound the alarm bells. It's not going to be good.
Yeah.
Poor Vancouver.
Their other
I'm
matches.
so ready for them.
There are other matches against the San Francisco Shock, so that one's going to be tough for sure.
Yeah.
But hey, after what we saw in the first week, there's definitely a scenario where they just come in and like roll the Shock. It's just nobody saw it coming. Like, who knows?
Yeah, one of those unpredictable dark horse teams for sure. Maybe they're hiding strats, you know. Maybe they're waiting for more
They're
mid-table teams to pull out the real stuff, so that people underestimate them.
Yeah, they're basically just sharking. They're sharking people, and they're putting $5
Another
down.
S word comes to mind.
table.
I know.
And they're putting $5 down to the pool table, and then like looking bad, and then they're putting down big money and just running the table. Maybe that's I think that's a very bad plan, but who knows?
There's some New York copian.
I'm most interested to see their game on May 27th versus Toronto, because like that's another like massive question mark that I think could show some like strength of either of those teams.
I've got so many question marks about half the teams in here, because like half of them could be top level contenders, or could just have like gotten lucky this week, or could just like have gotten unlucky this week. Like I'm looking at all of these matchups, and there's a few notable upsets, obviously, but then you look at like some of the teams like Washington, all over the place, Toronto, all over the place, Florida, all over the place, Boston, maybe underperforming a little, New York, maybe underperforming a little, but very possible for these teams to bounce back and again be contenders for finals placings. Maybe not finals, but like maybe top 8 placings leading into this kickoff clash.
Yeah.
Like
Watchman
that's
is
something
such a question mark for me.
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that's gonna be really fun is seeing how these questions get answered. Like the one I had all weekend is like I think Toronto will be okay as long as they don't have to play like Reinhardt at any point. Because like they got Muse on tank and Hotba on tank, and I don't think either one of them can play Reinhardt at the level that would be needed. So as long as like the meta doesn't get towards that, I think they might be okay. But like yeah, like you said, Tikatee, there's like questions with almost every team. Like obviously it's only been one weekend. Every
Yeah.
team's played 2 matches so far in the West. And yes, there's just more questions than answers right now.
Yeah.
You bring up Toronto and talking about Muse. You know, going into this week, I really wasn't sure how I felt about Muse's play, and watching the way he played Winston
Mhm.
against Houston in the Winston versus Doom tank matchup, I actually was really impressed. He did a really good job at bubbling key parts, isolating Dante, and I think that was one of the big parts of why they won those control maps is how good Muse was at not only bubbling off supports but bubbling off Dante and the LOS between Dante and his team. And that was a big positive. But not only that, Muse actually has crazy primal play.
Yeah.
There was a lot of fights where he actually hard carried with his primal plays. And
Yeah, there was that one at the end where they were showing him just knocking, I think it was 2 off. There was like an
Yeah.
ulting soldier, and I think it's Zenyatta, and he's just like yeeting people off the map, and like it looked awesome.
Has Primal become like an even stronger ultimate in Overwatch 2, do you think?
Good question.
I think for 2 reasons I would say yes. One, the more isolated nature of positioning in Overwatch 2, because no one's as reliant on tanks, it's easier to isolate a DPS in a corner and not be like peeled away from it. And then 2, because of the fast-paced nature of these engages, having an ultimate like Primal to just reset pressure, like if you're taking any amount of pressure and you've burned all your cooldowns as Winston and they're not expecting a Primal play, they're not ready. Most aggressive teams aren't ready for fights to go that long. A lot of fights in Overwatch 2 are super explosive, and we saw some people tweeting about stats. So it's like once the first kill happens, it's almost like really guaranteed that that team's going to win the team fight. It's something like an 80% chance right now, according to league stats. So in order to either deny that kill by having the Primal available to save yourself as Winston or disrupt and engage in the first place, I think being able to take the wind out of team sails that quickly and that big of a tempo swing back in your team's favor makes it even better than it is in Overwatch 1. And I'm definitely on the train that says Primal's like one of the best ultimates in the game still.
Do you think the lessened CC in Overwatch 2 might have something to do with that as well? I know a lot of Annas were like hitting sleeps on Primal Winston's all weekend.
Turns out you only need one. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as they sleep for like 60% of their ult, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's the only real counter that you see, and even in Overwatch League, because you don't have the Zarya to bubble your monkey when he goes in. You don't have the D.Va to eat sleep when he goes in, and so you definitely, I think you see a lot more Primals getting slept. But if you can dodge the sleep dart, I think Primal definitely is one of those.
Yeah, insane abilities.
Yeah, definitely very good, and that benefited Toronto very well. Muse actually impressed me so much with those Primal plays.
And looking forward to next week too. There's going to be a couple interesting matches. Like on Friday, on the 13th, we have San Francisco Shock going against Houston Outlaws. To kind of tie that into what we've been talking about, I think that will start answering questions, maybe more for the Outlaws than the Shock. But it's going to be a really enlightening match. And then later on the weekend, you got the Fuel playing the Gladiators, and that is going to be billed as like a heavyweight fight, like top of the card match.
Yep.
And that one should be a really fun match.
Yeah, I think both those matches are absolutely key matches in the league. Not even just for those two teams, but for determining where the rest of the league stands as well. I mean, you know, Dallas Fuel versus Gladiators, 2 of the teams that are considered top 3 right now. I remember, maybe not top 3 after this week, but you know, coming into the season, definitely top 3, top 5 for sure already right now. And to see them go against each other is going to be a very, very big one. And the Houston versus San Francisco match, I think, this determines if these teams are actually top 5 teams or not. You know, did Houston get lucky by Dallas not showing up on the day? You know, are they actually going to be able to get exploited by other teams like Toronto exploited their control and push map? Whereas Shock, Shock had a pretty easy week, and now they have to play an opponent that actually is showing that they're pretty tough, and an opponent that is playing a lot of Doomfist. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how Shock plays against the Doomfist playstyle.
I think this is a really good opportunity for Shock, honestly. Like, they're starting with a basically brand new roster. Having a couple warm-up games early, I feel like the coaching is so strong. I feel like having a couple soft pitches early in the season to kind of figure stuff
Give them
out.
some momentum, yeah.
Yeah, I think being like, okay, we'll do a couple like practice matches, and kind of go from there. Because like Kaluj was definitely struggling. Spent a lot of the match asleep.
Unfortunately,
yeah,
there was so many situations too where like it was just an obvious misplay. Like, obviously, I'm not an Overwatch League player myself. It's easy for me to talk a little smack when these pros are like missing like millisecond timings on their bubbles or on their positions, stuff like that. Right. But you see other Winstons in the league doing this, and they're outplaying on a sleep darts, not 100% consistently. Obviously, a lot of sleep darts are landing these days, but they're doing a much more consistent job than we saw Kaluj doing. So he's definitely still the biggest question mark for me on the Shock, and I'm curious if Shock will be one of those teams where maybe they bump a DPS up to the tank Doomfist slot and they try it, because they've been known to show some interesting strats in the past. We've seen the Super Genji, for example. Now we're just doing that in reverse. You take a Genji player, put him on tank. And I think they could be one of the teams that succeeds with it. Honestly, I think any team could succeed with it. I wasn't too impressed. The only other real team that was committing heavily to Doomfist was Atlanta. I wasn't super impressed with Hawks Doomfist, and it seems like every other team is just preferring Winston, and I'm wondering how much of that is because of tank players being more comfortable on Winston than on Doomfist. Obviously, Doomfist is a lot more new, been a DPS in the past, so it's not been in the tank's back pocket or anything, but Houston's showing that potential for sure. I'm curious if that's to see if that becomes a trend in the league.
I'll take the other stance on Hawks Doomfist, because I thought he definitely played a different style than Dante, and you could argue one or the other is better, but Hawk's style was definitely way more team oriented in setting things up for the team, and so it's definitely not as flashy, but I think it's a really consistent play style that a lot of teams could copy that kind of play style rather than trying to be super flashy like Dante. Dante has a long history with Doomfist, so it's not crazy to expect him to be able to know all these rollouts and hit the combos in the back line. But if there are teams that don't have experienced Doomfists, I think copying the playstyle that Hawk kind of has, where it's way more team oriented, you're mostly focused on disruption and setting up your Genji or your Echo, whatever. I think that's a really solid playstyle to look to learn from.
And it's definitely one of those things where that video's out there now, right? Like, people can see that and study it. And so maybe that, ushers in like the era of Doomfist. Who knows?
I was just gonna say, as a counter argument to Aero's point there, and we'll go down this rabbit hole forever, I'm sure.
Yeah,
sure.
But if your objective is more team-oriented play, surely there's better tanks in the roster for that kind of thing. There's better counter-engaged tanks in either a D.Va or a Zarya. There's better dive and initiator tanks in the Winston. Obviously, Wrecking Ball was disabled this week. Maybe they've been playing like a ton of Wrecking Ball, and then all of a sudden they couldn't, so they opted for the Doomfist kind of thing. Because I could see Wrecking Ball filling that similar position, a more supportive, engaging role, less all-in, less flashy individual plays, but finding more consistent value than something like a Doomfist might find. That's me personally. Obviously, I'm not in the scrim room with the Atlanta Reign. They're finding success. Obviously, they don't need my help. But it's an interesting choice to me to, like you said, play a slower, not passive style in the Doomfist, but definitely more focused on follow-up initiation rather than individual playmaking that the Houston was doing. And if I were to compare it to like anything in Overwatch 1, Houston's playing like ball D.Va dive, whereas Atlanta's kind of playing like double bubble. If that makes any sense.
It actually does make sense.
Okay.
And it's an interesting play style. I mean, the key thing about it is Doomfist cooldowns are low enough that he has a lot of versatility that maybe other tanks don't have, in being able to choose to do flashy, aggressive backline plays, but then can also come back and even just hitting one punch on an engaging DPS can change the fight for your supports. But it's not easy. And I think one of the undervalued parts of Doomfist's kit is the slow on his slam now. You know, that in and of itself is just a setup for your DPS, because a 30% slow when you're a Genji trying to land your shurikens makes it infinitely easier to land your shurikens. Well, I'd say approximately 30% easier to land your shurikens.
The math checks out there.
You know, and so the versatility of Doomfist is interesting, but I think after playing him a lot and watching the teams this week, there's definitely ways you can exploit him. And I'm curious if, like, the way Toronto played is going to shut down teams that are trying to do that kind of style, you know, the tracer type stuff. And would the way Hawk playing Doomfist, would he get shut down like Dante did? But, you know, you could also go back to that argument of maybe it would just be better for teams if you don't have a really good Doomfist player, because punching and doing your shifts and all your punch cancels and your bounces and your turn slams and stuff, that's not easy stuff. You know, it takes a lot of time to really work on it and be just as, I think it's the same, maybe not as exaggerated as Ball, but with Wrecking Ball, it's if you're not a proficient insane Wrecking Ball player, you're just going to feed the whole time. And I think Doomfist falls almost into that category where there's a lot of tech and like feeling the flow of the fight to know where you need to be and when. And it's a really hard thing to do. And I'm curious to see if any teams are willing to try to force that pickup.
One thing I'm really excited about seeing is we're already seeing some of these teams like adapt and punish certain play styles.
Yeah.
And I feel like, especially because the game is so new, we might see these comps get like start iterating very quickly, which I'm really looking forward to. Like, we saw like Goats a little bit where it was like, what happens if we have Sombra? And then like 2 months later, we had Sombra all the time. But I feel like this might, because the game is changing so quickly and all these other changes have happened, right away it was like, yeah, Soldier Genji, awesome. And now it's like, oh, okay, well, now we're going to add the Tracer in the mix. Well, now we're going to run Doomfist. Well, you know, I'm really excited to see, because if one of these teams figures something out, right now it's so wide open that they could, you know, do a lot of damage before everyone can kind of realize what they're doing right, which really excites me.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
So, and kind of staying on the Overwatch League here, there was some interesting stuff that happened over the first weekend, and one of the things we did see was a strat that was brought out by the Florida Mayhem, and then they had to replay a point because it was an illegal maneuver. And I just wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on that, considering it was interesting kind of how it was handled, and, you know, Mayhem had to go back and replay the point, and it's, you know, and it was really an interesting way to handle it, to say the least.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to clarify what exactly was illegal about it, because a lot of people have questions on it. It's not putting a sim TP on a May wall, it's putting a sim TP on a May wall where you can't normally put a sim TP. So you're bypassing the game's terrain to use a TP on somewhere that's normally not TPable. And I think there's a lot to unpack with this one, because first of all, it is a rule, and it's a rule that's widely known. Even I knew about that rule, and I didn't coach for the last season. You know, it's a rule that everyone in Overwatch League knows or should know. And so using it as Florida, you know, they said they didn't know whether or not, you know, you believe that. It's one of those things where that is, in and of itself, in a nutshell, it's an exciting play. It's a new map. It's a new season. It's like this new thing that fans didn't even know that it was a rule. And so seeing the map, the little pop-up say, you know, illegal maneuver, Florida has to redo their attack, is definitely really jarring for a lot of fans, because they didn't really understand why that's the case, you know. And obviously, like if you're looking at the clip that's playing right now, that this is extremely strong for this map, because it bypasses, you know, this long straightaway that you would normally have to use all your resources to get through. And so overall, it's there's a lot of different takes you can have on this. Mine specifically is it definitely was an illegal maneuver. Let's be real. But I do think this kind of thing, the rule set should be looked at by Blizzard to see, is this something we want to keep? Because this is a moment on a live broadcast that's really exciting that just gets slapped down. And, you know, it definitely is a little deflating, you know, as a fan, watch this being so excited about it, be like, oh, well, I guess that's not allowed. You know, it's kind of this weird question mark, but you know, the counter argument being, and I'm sorry to monologue so long about this, is it is a known rule, and if Blizzard doesn't enforce the rule, what's the point of having the rule? You know what I mean? So I understand why Blizzard enforced it. I would like the rule set to consider maybe changing it or finding some kind of different solution. But I mean, ultimately, I think it was right for Blizzard to enforce it.
Just watching that clip back, I didn't rewatch it after seeing it for the first time live. It's so fun. You can like see the fear in Paris's eyes when they're dropping down on top of him with a Reinhardt and a May. It's so funny. But yeah, 100% agreed. This rule is. I don't have access to the current OWL rulebook, but I remember when things like this happened in the past, they added language to the rulebook. Things like not looking around corners third person by emoting, things like Winston surfing, where you just be constantly in the falling animation on points like Volskaya second and stuff like that. These were quickly ban-hammered by the league, and they added language specifically for these types of rules to the rulebook. And something similar happened on Oasis Gardens, where this exact tech was used, where people Maywalled over the tree part on Oasis, and then they TP'd above, and then got straight to point, got to the high ground, basically for free off of this little known rollout. And after that incident, I'm pretty sure it was that incident, they banned it in the league. And it was like, exactly like I said, using TP on a Maywall where a TP couldn't be placed otherwise. And there's so many arguments around this. I'm definitely hardcore into competitive integrity, so I lean a little bit heavier into like this needed to be enforced better, sooner, and potentially with a harsher punishment, given that it is a known rule. And then the other side of me is kind of like, okay, I've been in the league. I was there for the great Unco pause of 2019, and I know like how many different aspects go into a decision like this. Yeah. Like I remember during that pause, they went back and forth. It was who were we playing against? I don't even remember. It was on Havana and Guangzhou. Okay, so it was us, and they were going back and forth between the two teams, like trying to decide what to do. Yeah. And it took maybe like half an hour before there was like, okay, we're just gonna try and use the Wayback Machine, that their secret time travel tech that they were still developing and stuff like this. And it was a nightmare. And I could potentially see that same thing happening, except this is a written rule. You're breaching a very clear rule of the competition, and there should have been faster reinforcement of that. Maybe in a perfect world, they would have happened immediately after the play happens. They would have paused the match. They would have gone to the rule book. Referees would have blown their whistle, thrown up a red card, and then they had to either restart the attack or maybe take like a minute time deficit. If this is like a traditional sport, they'd find some way to punish them in game or something like that. Yeah. But what happened was they finished the entire map, not just Mayhem's attack. They played the other side of the map too. And then they waited until the very end where Paris lost the map to Mayhem to say, oh, I guess we should probably be competitively accurate here, and your guys are going to have to redo your attack. And like you were saying earlier before we started the broadcast, Aero, like even just the information of seeing like what heroes and what positions that Paris was holding on defense is such a competitive advantage for an attacking team.
Huge advantage.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know exactly what they're going to do. Obviously, there's so many random elements to Overwatch, but you know the style that they're going for. You've seen them play their defense, and you just got to beat it again.
Yeah, I definitely feel for Paris. I can put myself in their shoes to how it would feel to just in having to replay your defense as Paris. Just them having that information feels so bad, because it's okay, do we do the same thing and hope they don't just have another, are ready for it since they already saw it, or do we go with something different that maybe we haven't practiced to try to catch them off guard or something? And whether or not Paris were the ones that went to Blizzard and said, hey, this is illegal, which I don't think they did. I believe that was a decision that all Blizzard made.
I think Avala tweeted out that they had no part in the decision.
Yeah, I mean that definitely still feels bad because it's happened to you, and people will automatically associate that with you. I mean, you that got brought back repressed memories from the great Uncle Pause is because the whole reason that happened literally had nothing to do with us. You know, we just wanted them to fix the mouse, and then Blizzard messed it up, and it took 45 minutes to fix. And everyone thought it was, you know, the Dallas Fuel trying to
we're being like
this.
rules nitpicky.
Yeah, so I understand that side of Paris, and you know, maybe there is a better way to enforce a punishment onto Mayhem. But yeah, I think I still lean a little more to the side of I'd like to see more quirky stuff like this in matches, but I would like to see the wording change and what kind of things you can and can't do, and more fleshed out structure for how to deal with breaches of the rulebook.
It's so weird to me that like everyone just went in all in on the play. Like, yeah, it's a known rule. It's weird that they were like, yeah, screw it. You know, like,
Yeah.
Of course it's going to get flagged, but yeah, I think the big thing is just how confusing it was not having anything happen, because it was like super exciting, and because nothing happened right away, it was like, that was awesome. I can't believe that happened. I can't believe I watched that.
Yeah.
Oh, now you have to redo it. Instead of it should have been like pause. It's not even like some obscure thing.
Yeah, and they could have easily, because like that was almost an immediate team wipe for Mayhem too. They could have easily paused the game, gone to the rule book, and like, hey, that's not cool, and then restarted the map right there.
Yeah, it's like if you think back, like the first thing it reminded me of was like Defran using the grab over the top with the
Hollywood grab.
The Hollywood grab, yeah. And like, could you imagine if like they'd played the whole map and then been like, no, wait, sorry, that broke a rule, we have to go back. Like, it makes me worried that the next time something crazy and like not expected happens like that, there's going to be people going, oh, is that allowed? Like, are they going to go back? And it might take away some of that excitement.
I mean, I think Florida, despite being the ones that get punished, honestly, because of the way Blizzard handled it, also come out as victors, because now they have great social media memes.
Oh yeah,
for the rest of the season.
Tons of good PR.
You know, you get so much good PR off of that too. That's a weird scenario.
Yeah, all of a sudden everyone's talking about Florida.
I don't know if you guys are looking at the chat, but that's exactly what is going. People are saying in the chat.
Yeah, they're the people's champions now. They just want to have fun, but Blizzard's holding them down.
Yeah. The response from Florida on it was curious.
Yeah. I believe them. I believe McGrady and Gumbo just didn't know that rule existed.
Yeah.
I don't know why you would make that argument if that wasn't the case. It kind of makes you look bad as a coach, not knowing the rules to the game you're playing. But I don't believe, because they shared a screenshot on Twitter too that was like, that apparently Blizzard had quoted them saying like, this was the rule you broke, and the rule just said like, don't abuse any bugs, and like that's it.
Oh yeah, that's really
I think I seem to remember, and this might just be like a false memory of mine, but I seem to remember, again, like very specific language being added to the rulebook anytime one of these exploits was found, and they used very specific wording for like how the tech existed and how it shouldn't be used, kind of thing.
Yeah, I specifically remember anytime there was a channel that all the Overwatch League people had on the Discord. Anytime something like that would happen, everyone would get pinged, and it would say, this
don't
is not allowed. Don't do this. You know, and I remember that being on there the minute it happened on there, because it happened in Oasis. There was an instance of it happening in Eichenwald and Contenders.
Right, that's the one that I remember from about 3 years ago.
That one's so crazy too.
So cool.
It's basically the same on Circle Royale, to be honest. It's a very similar skip.
Yeah,
but like, it's Eichenwald is just such a grueling choke to go into. Seeing that happen was like, oh, that's just really smart, and that's what makes it really disappointing, I guess, because it's like, that broke the rules, but when someone figures something like that out, it is really exciting. Like it does show a level of ingenuity beyond like, we have good aim, and we can make good rotations. It's like we are pushing the limits of the game as a whole.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember? It just brings me back to original plays like this. Do you guys remember the meta Athena Dorado push?
Yeah, that's
from
the
a long
first
time
thing
ago?
I thought of.
the OG Maywall boost. So it was such a garbage play,
Oh,
but
yeah,
they
it's
did
terrible.
it anyway.
It was the first time anyone
Where-
did it on broadcast.
Yeah, so they rotated around to the high ground Dorado first as attackers. They pushed down the stairs and past the choke and went all the way to that left mega, and then boosted themselves above those roofs, above the apartments, and then just slid along the rooftops to get to basically the defenders' chokes. And they got no good positioning out of this, but their opponents were like so baffled that they just laid down and died to the team fight after that. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the worst like positional rotations. It has so
It does
little meaning.
nothing for you.
But
Like
it
you're
was
already past the
exciting.
choke before you start that rotation.
Yeah, it was exciting as ingenuity. And when you think of Florida, I mean, their head coach Gumba. While I haven't worked with him directly, I've heard so many good things about him. And these guys, Gumba, McGravy, this whole group of coaches are very smart and very good individuals. So I definitely don't think there was malicious intent with it.
Yeah.
But it does kind of give a bad look, to say you didn't know the rules. But
Yeah.
to be fair, like you said, that tweet they posted with Blizzard's wording on it is so vague that it almost feels like Blizzard should specifically highlight using a TP in a spot that's not specifically TPable.
Again, like maybe all they had was like that unofficial documentation, like you said, like in the Discord channel or like through emails that went out to team owners and stuff like that. But yeah, it really seems like they should, if that is actually all it says in the rulebook, they definitely need updated language. But yeah, it's weird on both sides for sure.
Yeah, and
But
that's
we're definitely
something-
trying that in ranked games now.
Yeah. 100%.
Oh yeah, that's coming out like every quick play game
Yeah.
Well,
in the last
that's-
like 24 hours.
That's what was happening, like, after that when Contenders, when we mentioned, I think it was an Irish team that did it on Eichenwald. And, in, like, a gold game I was playing the next day, they're like, oh, we're going to do that thing with the Maywall. It's like, but it's a gold game, so only 3 of us did it, and it did not work at all.
Takes 30 seconds just to line up the wall.
Right.
But absolutely. But that's the cool part of it though, is like people saw it and they're like, this is really cool. Let's try it.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah.
it's one of these like really interesting, innovative, creative things that make the game exciting and make you want to try something.
Yeah.
Like it's the like, oh, I just saw. Oh man, you know what? I'm gonna stop there because I was about to make a reference that was so dated.
Do it.
That I'm-
now you have to do it.
Because I'm like, oh, I just saw Rodney Mullen like pull off a dark slide. I'm gonna try it. So
Okay, yeah, that's from like
skateboarder from the early-
1990.
I know that one, actually.
yeah.
I'm
So
with-
it's that same feeling of like you see someone do something so interesting and creative and
yeah.
pushing the limit of the whole thing.
Well, that's
Things-
exactly why I think that the rules should be looked at, because if someone can watch something on an Overwatch League broadcast that gets them excited to play the game, then that is a win for literally everybody. There is no losers in that. So I think when it's an exciting play, something like that, it's unique. Let's look at ways to but maybe that's a deeper issue of you would have to actually code these spots out and patch the game to actually fix a lot of the ones that are unintended. But it's exciting, and if it drives people to play the game, then I'd say let it be.
But
I
also
do
patch the game.
Yeah, but also patch the game.
Yeah, like it's not like this is some like this happened
This is
multiple
not new.
times. No, and it happened in other maps. Like just I know it's not that simple, but like maybe just float some Maywalls around the roofs.
Yeah, and sim players are going around and trying that and like finding all the spots where the sim tellies can go that
Oh,
yeah.
normally work, kind of thing. It's just crazy. So yeah, 2 things that are banned in competition that May Sim Wallstrat and Rodney Mullen, because I think they're both banned in competition. technically
Yeah,
now.
that's true.
So I mean, depending on how you want to look at it, that's one of the best moments or one of the worst moments of the week, or maybe a little bit of both. For me, like if we're talking like peak and pit, another good moment of the week or one of the best moments of the week was just seeing like a live event again in North America, down in San Antonio, and just having like the crowd back. Big play happens, you can hear the crowd cheering in the background. The casters have to like shout over top of the crowd noise. And honestly, a little bit of a shout out to Avast and CP, because like I thought their casting was really good, and like obviously for Avast, like I haven't seen him do a ton of casting, and it made it really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome they managed to come back for some games.
Yeah, I will always stand by that. To me, Overwatch is a game best played live. There actually is a lot of exciting moments, and when you have a crowd cheering on all the little exciting things, it becomes a completely different experience. You know, as a fan, as a viewer, even as a coach playing in the game. You know, I remember the very first home stand we did in Dallas. You know, we were playing Valiant in Houston in its first homestand Overwatch League ever had. And from a coach perspective, we're listening to the team's comms in game. OG hits a shatter, and like we can't even hear our team's comms anymore because you hear the crowd through their mics just blasting through our speakers, and it's just
the whole arena's shaking, including like us in the green room backstage.
Yeah, like it's pretty wild, and it's an experience that when you're there, you won't ever forget that. You know, and I think it's similarly to like the World Cup event. You know, even though World Cup teams aren't these super practiced teams, they're not teams been playing together for 6 months, you know, grinding out perfect synergy, but the fans still come into that arena down in wherever it is in California or Anaheim, and it's a 360 dome. You're standing on stage, and the whole crowd's cheering, and the floor literally shakes up and down, you know, because of how crazy it is. And it's such a special experience that I really wish this could happen more often.
Yeah, even just listening to the broadcast, like hearing the crowd cheer, like I couldn't help but smile. Like when I was hearing it, like I forgot how hype it was. You know, it was like almost emotional. Like feeling, you could feel the energy. Even just like sitting in my room, my little desk chair, watching on my PC, I could like feel the energy coming off that crowd, and that's awesome.
And it makes for so many good moments too. Like Aero, you mentioned that first homestand in Dallas, and that's the one where you guys won the second match against Houston. Then like everyone was on the stage, and I think OG was crying, and it was such a cool thing to watch, because like I remember where I watched it from, and you know it was so long ago, but I can tell you like exactly where I was when that happened.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
I want to talk about Widowmaker because there's this clip of Happy on Circuit Royale. Okay, this is a peak
absolute
right here,
animal,
where this guy is absolutely insane, and he hits these like 3 headshots in a row from the tiniest angles in motion, finds the perfect. The guy's insane, and if there's more opportunities for us to see Happy Widowmaker, I say please bring it on. Let me see it. It is so good and so clean, and that really, seeing that happen refreshed my faith in Happy. You know, that those were some pretty nasty shots, and I want to say that's, you know, one of those that's up there for me in terms of a really positive thing that happened over the weekend.
We see so many more. Maybe it's just like it feels like it because the league's back and I'm excited, but it feels like there's so many more like individual crazy plays we saw this weekend. Obviously, there's all the honest stuff to talk about, but like you said, like Happy on the Widowmaker, tons of Genji moments, proper on Tracer on that one match on Ilios, all these pop-up moments, and like almost every single game had a moment like this. Usually there'd be like 1 or 2 highlights from like a set of games from a day, and then most of the games would be like complete one-sided washes and stuff like that. But it felt to me like highlights are back, and Overwatch 2 5 vs 5 is definitely facilitating that and creating these crazy moments. Happy on Widowmaker definitely stood out to me as well, and like it just reminds me of when he first came into the league on the Spark. As soon as we started scrimming against them, like every single one of our players on the field was like, this guy's the best Widowmaker in the league, bar none. It's like, this guy's insane. It just became like this whole discussion about like, okay, how do we beat Happy anytime we were going up against them? So yeah, definitely good to see him in top form.
It's so funny that you say like clips are back and like highlights are back, because like we kind of touched on this last week. Like when it was Goat's era, it was like, great, we're gonna see the same play, like 8
the same grab deep ball play.
And it's gonna be like, yeah, it's kind of cool. And now that like, you know, Rollock came in, and I think that helped a little bit, because then you start seeing like big pulse bombs again. But like looking at this play from Happy, it was absolutely cracked. Like just doing all these wild things that you're just not going to see or you haven't seen in years. Like there was another play also last weekend with Nero on the Genji that was
Yeah.
just completely wild. Like you saw like an ace, and I guess the aces are a little bit easier now because there's only 5 people, but you still have to get 5 final
Oh.
blows in the same fight. Yeah, yeah, I'm happy if I get 2.
And that was without a blade too, right? That was just
Yeah.
Nano Genji
Yeah, it
and
was
an on
And a
Nano-
Bionade.
Yeah,
And
that was a
But there
sick
was-
one for sure.
Bionade.
A big fat Bionade.
Yeah, like that dude got more dash resets in that like 5 seconds, and not even an entire map. Like maps.
Yeah.
Like it's not
Yeah.
even fair. Like how he just kind of flies around, just like dash, melee, shuriken, repeat. It's
Seeing him smile in the
absolutely disgusting.
webcam right after
Yeah.
too, like he knows
Yeah.
it's a highlight. He
Yeah,
knows people
like-
are gonna post this one on Reddit.
In that highlight video, they even you can hear him talking a little bit like, oh god, like yeah, like he knew exactly what he did.
God,
Yeah, that's a good
And
point.
disgusting.
I would almost say the true highlight here is the Enenade.
100%.
Because you look at one of the pits of this weekend, and I'm gonna say it's the vast majority of Genji blades, because
Right.
Genji following up on purple on anti-nades, very good. Genji trying to blade people is really just kind of a trading ultimate now, and you can tell that when the blade gets pulled in order to get like an enemy Lucio's beat or something, and all the fans are typing like Genji blade, let's go, you know, oh, everyone's all excited, and it's like, oh, it's actually just nothing, you
Yeah,
know.
I think,
and
I
oh,
think
yeah.
there was one in the Toronto Houston game where the person popped the blade and literally just was like the beat came out and they're like, oh okay, I'm getting out of here, and just
Yeah,
left.
yeah.
And like it was just like them climbing a wall for 5 seconds. It was like, that's not what I was hoping for, but like, you know, tactically they pulled out the beat, they kind of did something with it, and they were okay with that.
Yep. And then you
Okay,
turn around
well,
and use the visor, and you know.
Yeah.
visors
Should we
are-
talk about
like-
like how insane you would sound if you went back 2 years and said, yeah, so like we're gonna use Blade first, we're gonna be running
Mhm.
Genji, we're gonna use Blade first to force out their sound barrier, and then Tac Visor's gonna carry us through the fight. Like these are not normal Overwatch team play ultimates, but they've definitely found their place at Overwatch 2 apparently.
That's another
Just in
positive for
general.
me. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Ageless.
Oh, I was just saying, just in general, like the blades. They were like, I'm gonna solo blade this Lucio. No, you're not.
Yeah.
I
You're
can't
gonna
wait,
wander around Eichenwald.
I can't wait for that. I'm gonna solo blade this Zen, and he just kicks you away, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you might
The-
as well pull out your brochure for the Eichenwald tour, because all you're doing is just walking around looking at the architecture.
yeah.
I saw. I don't remember what match it was, but they like leapt off like the castle and Eichenwald second point, and they like went to solo blade a Lucio, and then just got like booped away, and just like impotently ran around near the mega, and it was like,
Yeah.
oh my god, like
If,
what
if they're not getting
what is
sleep darted
happening?
by the enemy on
Yeah.
it too.
And, yeah, it slept and then bionated. It has been unbelievable trying to, and that's like these are good Genjis.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
could say that another highlight for Anna's in hitting this nasty sleep that, you know, maybe
Right.
are actually kind of easier than you think, but they look pretty cool. So
Yeah, it's like a baseline requirement now is Ana to be able to 180 flick a dashing Genji. Like if you can't do that, you can't play in the league.
they-
that's
they
the
were-
bar now.
They were talking about it on the cast yesterday. Like, if you go back to when Anna came out, it'd be like, oh, this guy's crazy on the Anna. They got like a 48% accuracy with the sleep darts. And now it's like, you have to sleep 8 people minimum per match, or you're just
Yeah.
complete garbage. Like,
Yeah,
like the
also
bar has been
Fielder's
raised.
doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Fielder's doing it on 200 ping.
Yeah.
I know he's not on ping anymore, but he was, and it did not matter.
yeah.
No, he was like
I mean-
sleeping Faraz on 200 ping.
Yeah. I mean, Fielder even had that 6 sleep in his match against Houston where he slept Echo off the map, which was pretty sick. He did the 180 flick on Echo off the map. And then in the same match, you had Iris hitting so many sleeps. Literally, what was it? The nano primal monkey, the nano blade, the nano attack, doesn't matter. Iris is there with the sleep dart, putting you to bed. And that was some pretty highlight moments. The Genji one with where Sparkle and Fearless are diving him on Dorado second, and he weaves it past the Winston's shoulder
Oh,
and
yeah.
hits Genji in the foot. Like that's actually pretty wild. That's a highlight in and of
Yeah.
itself.
There was like
gonna
that
be
sleep
like-
dart a couple years ago from Izzyaki, like on Dorado. where he slept somebody like on the roof, and like that stuff happens just all the time now. It's like a normal sleep.
Oh, now it's gonna be like, okay, we're gonna use blade to pull out sleep. Okay, and then we're gonna visor.
We primal to force sleep dirt, and
Yeah.
then we can engage. Yeah. Talking more about peaks and pits, I'm gonna start with the negative. I think someone has to talk about it. My pit of this whole weekend has just been the broadcast quality of the whole series of matches. Like, obviously, day one was rough. If you were watching in North America, if you were watching the North American stream, apparently it was fine everywhere else. But the North American stream had like frame drops, stutters, audio desyncs, like every problem you could name from streaming. And it was almost comedically timed, where every time there was like an overtime fight, it would just cut to black and then come back like and show the map score. Like, you just wouldn't get to see maps end. And this happened on like 3 different maps on day one. It was crazy. But then even once they fixed a lot of those major issues, the broadcast is still like a little bit harder to watch. Not only because I think the spectators are still figuring out the flow of Overwatch 2, the game is a lot more spread out now. There's multiple fights going on at the same time, kind of thing. It is a harder game to spectate, I would say, which is a little bit ironic because I think that people expected it to be easier with 5 vs 5. But on top of that, the game is like broadcasting in like somewhat low quality. And I don't want to like sound nitpicky around the league, but like, especially since we don't have replay codes from the Overwatch League, like this is the only footage we as coaches get to look at the game. I would love a cleaner feed. I would love more detailed information. I would love to be able to follow along as I'm watching live without feeling like my eyes are blurred, without feeling like I'm watching someone's first stream on YouTube kind of thing. I think it was a little bit embarrassing from the league's part, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think it was Avast that had the clip of him publicly saying, that there's some thing where they're sending a feed over to Toronto and has to come back to the Blizzard offices in order to get produced,
because produced by.
So there's multiple points that it has to go through that's causing this kind of stuff, and I hope this gets fixed because, like you said, it definitely makes it tough to analyze the game for that replay viewer and be able to pull content and do stuff with it. It makes it really hard, for sure.
Yeah, I could see it getting fixed. It's like an encoding issue, is my understanding of it. So it's like somewhere there's a processing, and like it is challenging, but it's being done consistently well by basically every other esport, including like EU contenders. People were posting like, here's a 4K 60 FPS EU contenders. Yeah. Like, oh, okay, so we got something is going wrong. I know they did recently change producers, I think. Yeah,
they're being produced by a third party now. Dome Entertainment, is that what they are called?
Yeah, I think so.
And that's the site in Toronto that Aero was talking about. Yeah. So yeah, understandable, some issues, some growing pains. But yeah, like you said, if this doesn't get fixed, this is going to be a rough year for watching. I imagine they'll figure out some solution though, while they're come to find some new broadcast method to solve it. I'm sure there's smarter people than us working on the problem. But
it'll be fixed this week, I think. Like when something goes wrong on like a Friday afternoon, you're like, well, this is going to be a long weekend. Like, it's not like everyone's, a lot of these, like, especially like utilities issues and things like that. Like, I can't even get a router in like a week. Like, I couldn't imagine getting like IT professionals to come in, like fix an encoding issue across North America. I'm guessing it's like, what is it, Monday? Yeah, I bet it's almost fixed already if it's not. But yeah, it definitely is not a good look for, I would say, like a lot of people coming back.
Yeah, for opening weekend.
Especially with the they had like over 100,000 people watching it, right? And so viewership is up, and the product you're putting out is not as good, and that's only going to hurt people with comeback. Even though there's some people that are just like farming Overwatch League tokens or whatever, but
I'd say a large percentage.
But I do think it is something they'll be able to sort out. Like they have the resources and all that to do so, and obviously the know-how. If they were able to figure out, 2020 or 2021, whatever that was, when we were all stuck at home and everything had to be like switched to remote just on the turn of a dime. And I know there were some problems with desyncs and stuff at the beginning of that too, but they were able to figure it out eventually. So I have I have no doubt that they will be sorting this out shortly as well.
Yeah, the tech is there and they're pros. It's unfortunate, and I think everyone was shaky. Like the teams were shaky.
Right.
Some of the casters you could see had nerves for sure, which like absolutely we saw. I like big time. We had leg day and lemon kiwi for our own tournament like a month ago or 2 months ago. A month ago. Oh my god.
Time flies.
And it was so awesome seeing them get announced for Overwatch League, and you could tell there was nerves.
Yeah, we talked about all the rookie players in the league. Now there's rookie talent as well from the casting side of things. Obviously, just like the players, they're going to get better and more comfortable with time. And I'm super excited. I'm a big fan of all the casting duos this year. I'm a little bit sad we don't have Bren and Josh back, obviously.
Right.
But all the casting duos have been fantastic this year. Obviously, Uber and Mr. X stand out as the veterans, as the sort of like flagship casters this year. Uber, of course, being the rap god and being untouchable in terms of casting talent, in my eyes at least. But all the new casting duos I was super impressed with.
Fantastic. Yeah, they're all great.
Uber's brain is so much faster than like pretty much anybody else's. Like he just throws in like little things that if you're not listening, you might not even pick up on. Like there was in the Toronto match, like Finale gets killed. He's like, oh, and you know the curtain drops on Finale, and I'm just sitting there as a caster, like, fuck, that was so good.
Taking notes. Yeah.
For real, we actually had a conversation following our tournament. Like it's so difficult watching someone like Uber because when we first started casting, we were like, oh, we should like watch Uber because and Mr. X because like they're really good, and there's such a gulf between like starting out casting and Uber X that it's hard to get better, I guess, because it's not an achievable goal in the next like 2-5 years. So it was really interesting. They're just fantastic, and I think really I would watch Uber read a phone book, any like, and I think same with Bren and Josh. Like I have watched more Valorant content probably
Because
since they
them.
moved over. Yeah.
Yeah, same here.
Like if Uber casted basketball, I'd be like, all right, I'm into basketball. I guess.
For
That's
sure.
a big compliment because I know you're not a huge basketball fan to start with. So
I've never paid attention to basketball in my life, but I would watch it every weekend if Uber was casting.
So turning our views ahead, now that we're kind of done looking at the past, like we do want to highlight a couple upcoming or recent events that have just happened, I guess. Like there was the Collegiate Esports Commissioners Cup, and I believe Illinois State's beat out Harrisburg in the finals. So it's always just fun to give out, you know, a shout out to the collegiate tournament that are happening. That was a LAN tournament as well. So like Door and Dryad were there casting that in person. So 2 more casters that we did see at the Questline Open who did a fantastic job when they worked with us as well. And they were, I'm sure, really fun to watch. I believe next week we have the Natter Community Beta Clash coming up, and that is going to be a really, really exciting one to look forward to as well, Aegis.
Yeah, they just doubled the amount of teams in it. There's 128 teams are going into this tournament.
Are we on a team? Like, should we be playing?
No, we have to.
Aero and I are playing in it.
Oh, that's a good point.
We do have a team. Our little I don't even know what to call us. Our little ragtag group of players. Yeah, that's what I submitted as the team name. I don't know if we'll accept it, but especially with our logo.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah. We're submitting a team. I calculated our SR average, and we're like just below 3,500. So, given that like half our accounts haven't played ranked in like 10 seasons, I don't know if they'll accept that. We'll see where they put us in terms of bracket, and yeah, maybe we'll make a run. I'm super looking forward to that. It's always good to see how the amateur scene is handling changes as well as the pro scene, right? So not just talking about like contenders, open division, collegiate, but how the average player is like playing Overwatch 2. And I think this will be a really fun experience. I think this will solidify how much people love Overwatch if they get a chance to play in this. And I think it's going to be a really good look for the casual competitive community
Yeah.
of the beta, given how early on it is. Like, this is only going to grow from here, I imagine.
What's
Tournaments
wild
are-
is that they adding teams. Like
Yeah.
that 128 teams is
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Like,
That's
Adrian,
so many teams.
we know from experience like how hard it can be to find those teams sometimes, and that's it's a
Yeah.
crazy amount.
Yeah, well, the start of Overwatch 2, this reminds me so much of the start of Overwatch 1, where I think if there's any tournament that pops up, there's going to be a lot of people that want to sign up for it, and I'd like to see a lot more of these. I don't know the whole
Yeah.
process behind it. I don't want to pretend like I do, but to see a tournament like this pop up right now, I think is very healthy and very good. And if you were around at the very beginning of Overwatch 1, it was the Wild West, and there were these kind of tournaments were popping up multiple times a week, every week, and it was filled with tons and tons of applicants. And I have no reason to doubt that it would happen right now if we had even more tournaments.
Yeah.
Pop up. Just like you said, Natter's tournament has doubled in number of teams signed up, and that's really exciting. And I think that's only just going to keep happening if these tournaments keep going.
Yeah, the
It's
interest is there for
definitely-
sure.
It's definitely going to keep happening because you got to think people only have limited access to the beta right now. Not everybody has it. So the hope is as long as more people get access to the beta, then you can see more of these community tournaments pop up. I mean, I did the math. And there's 128 teams. Is that what you said, Ageless?
Yeah.
So that's if there's only 5 people on a team, that's 640 people in the same tournament, which is bananas.
Yeah,
I
for
will
like
say-
an amateur community event. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got like I think it's a couple $1,000 prize pool, which is like it's not small, but like if please watch them.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
If
In addition
we
to
want,
showing up to play, people need to watch for sure.
yeah, because this is where these sponsorships come from, and it can be so challenging, especially for Overwatch, especially for Blizzard games in the last couple years, and in a game that's been somewhat neglected. I'll say over the last couple years, and by a company that's been aggressively neglectful. It's like having these viewers supporting these smaller tournaments is so key. This is how sponsors get involved. This is how we get more of these things. This is how this community and like the I don't want to say casual, but like I guess like community oriented tournaments can grow. And it's just a lot of fun. There's a lot of people that are just having a good time. They're bizarrely good at what they do. Like we worked with BPL, who's doing the production for Natter at this community bash. What BPL is able to achieve, given that it's not like a broadcast studio, it's just like
Pretty cool.
10 nerds and some OBS and like open source software. What they're able to achieve is astonishing.
Yeah, super
Yes.
impressive stuff.
And it's really like if you've known of Natter at all, or if you've interacted with Natter, Natter is amazing. Like just do it, to support Natter, or even like an org like Champry is involved as well, right? And Champry is another org that we've worked with, Ageless, and they're fantastic. So there's a lot of good reasons to like support like these community tournaments, these grassroots things, in the hope that it's all going to keep growing and snowballing towards the release of Overwatch 2. And the more of these community tournaments there are, the more that everybody can be involved, right? Like I suck at Overwatch if you look at my SR, and there are still tournaments. Like I believe this tournament is open to all SRs, right? So
Yep.
hypothetically, I could play in it and just feed my brains out like in a tournament setting, which is pretty
Not
cool.
only that, it's also going to be segmented by like SR tiers, from what I know. So it's not like you're going to be going up against contenders teams if you're signing up at like a gold or plat level SR or anything like that as a team. You're going to be playing against at least somewhat similarly skilled opponents, and that again is great for growing the scene, because you're not going to have fun if you just go in, lose 2 games, and then leave.
Right.
You're going to have a good time by meeting other players this game same skill level and really like pushing yourself as a competitive player and learning how much fun it is to actually compete in a game like Overwatch.
You get
it's
so much better scrimming.
Oh yeah.
It's so much
True.
different than like just playing competitive. And like honestly, Tikatee, if I'm gonna be real with you, I'm feeding regardless of what SR I sign up for. It's happening. That's the promise. If you listen closely, you can hear a whole bunch of people just scratching off like play with NewBeat. Just don't need that anymore. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think playing even in like the most amateur competitive environment, it's a completely different game. It's a completely different experience. Like we used to play in like a plat console league. I got better in like 2 months playing in a plat console league. I guess this would have been like 4 or 5 years ago now.
right.
Then we did, 6 stacking in comp every day for 8 hours. Like it's just such a incredible experience.
Yeah.
For people who haven't like scrimmed before, it's so good.
That's all I want to do. I don't
Yeah,
even want to queue up in the matchmaking quick play anymore.
Oh,
I
man.
just want to scrim.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a different experience. It's a different game.
Yep.
for sure. Here's a little bit of an anecdotal story for you guys. So if you didn't know, the way Aero and I met originally was because we played on an amateur team together at the launch of Overwatch 1. And we were awful. We still are awful. We're doing our best. But we were part of those people in the Wild West, just like hoping for competition everywhere we looked. We were signing up for all the weekly tournaments. We were like scrounging Reddit and Twitter for anything that came up. And I want to see, Aero, do you remember when we signed up for that dude's LAN? And it was like his birthday party LAN?
Yeah.
And he invited a bunch of people, and they were having a LAN in this guy's basement, but they didn't have enough teams to do a full tournament, so they were inviting people from Reddit, and we were the only team that signed up.
It was a
And
Reddit post of this tournament that had a $50 prize pool. We're like, hey, why not? Let's go take $50 from these guys.
Yeah.
And it turns out we were the only team that signed up in the online. And so there's
So
just 10 teams playing in a basement, and then us.
And we
nowhere near them.
stomped them. We dominated them. They were all trash.
I felt bad. We actually
We ruined this guy's birthday party. I just remember when we signed up, we joined a Discord, and we asked for a bracket because we thought this was a tournament, right? We thought this was like a real tournament that we were trying to sign up for. And they send us a picture of a whiteboard that they had drawn on. Because they're all there in person.
Name. It's like this little checkerboard. Like, oh, you guys will face it here. And it's like, what? What is this? And then we just rolled it,
Yeah, that was one of the funniest
working.
experiences.
I hope that person is still active on Reddit and he's like, yeah, you know what I did for my birthday? The Dallas Fuel Code just came and kicked the crap out of me at my birthday.
Yeah, you might have made their birthday better.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was almost 2 years before we joined the Fuel.
Yeah. So maybe they remember us. They look back like,
Maybe.
oh, wow.
We didn't
That's
change
why
our
we-
names.
No. Yeah. Yep. It was wild.
That was so funny.
So with that bombshell of the Tikatee and Aero like to ruin children's birthday parties, I guess we just move on. The last thing we wanted to highlight as well is Blizzard has announced their plans for the Pass Pro and the Overwatch Contenders Summer Series, which will be starting on May 21st, which is my birthday and Harvester's birthday as well. Just a big shout out if you want to send anything, just let us know. But they're gonna get that started off on the 21st. It looks like that will be involved with Overwatch 2. North America, Europe, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand are all involved. Obviously, they're going to want to pull in existing talent from previous competitive seasons of the Contenders as well. And it's just good to see that they're getting that off on the right foot.
Yeah. But yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's awesome. Contenders is back. It's awesome. There's a 50K prize pool in North America. It's awesome. They're supporting the amateur scene in Overwatch. But unfortunately, and a lot of people have been quick to point this out on Twitter, there's a few reasons to be a little bit worried if you're an amateur team, especially an open division team. The biggest one being open division is going to run before the contender season kicks off. And the contender season is going to kick off with the top 32 performing teams from an open division tournament that happens earlier. So the problem there isn't that not every open division team gets to compete for like open seeding in contenders. The problem is that open division is going to be held in Overwatch 1, while contenders is going to be held in Overwatch 2. So you're going to have a lot of open division teams scrimming and trying hard and trying to place well in this tournament in Overwatch 1. And if they do place well, if they make top 32, they instantly have to lose a tank player and then start scrimming in Overwatch 2 against teams who, the existing contenders teams who have been re-invited to already be as part of the bracket. They've already have access. They just announced they currently have given out beta codes to all the contenders talent if they didn't already have it. And all the returning players are going to obviously start scrimming on Overwatch 2 immediately if they know they're going to be competing in contenders. So the open division teams not only have to fight an uphill battle to place well in this tournament, they then have to turn around and instantly have strats ready for Overwatch 2 against their contenders teams who've been scrimming this game for over a month. It's a little bit ridiculous.
How bad is it going to feel as a team? You just qualify for to play the top 32. You're one of the top 32 teams, and boom, you have to kick one of your players.
Yeah, and what if you're a diva player? Like, it's a nightmare for a few teams, I imagine. But that being said, I mean, it'd be so easy to just run it all Overwatch 2, right? Like, it wouldn't be that hard. They're basically doing open access anyway with the way they're doing drops. Like, there's no reason to hinder people's access to Overwatch 2. The only thing I can think of is if this is going to run during periods where the beta is going to be down, they would have to let these teams into the tournament realm, which they probably don't want to do with any team that signs up for open division, because that could be any number of players imaginable.
That'd be everyone. Everyone would sign up for open.
Yeah, exactly. In order to play the Overwatch 2 beta, yeah. But it just seems really awkward, and it feels a little bit ham-fisted to ask so much of these Overwatch division teams. It feels like they're coming in at such a deficit compared to the returning contenders players.
Well, I guess I say like everyone would sign up for open division, but like people who take
Anyone
the game really seriously. Yeah. In that case, let them in. How many people is that? Like, probably a lot. But at the same time, I don't know. I feel like, I think you're right. I think there's like, you have to attend your open division matches would be a good.
Yeah. If you miss even like one match, they just take it away from your account or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, they got to keep growing that. That's going to be, that's super bizarre. And like, they might not have to even lose a tank player.
Yeah.
But it's just such a different game. Like, I've been playing Diva as an off tank for months. Yeah, like, okay, well now you're the only tank. Also, Diva plays completely different now. Also, Diva is kind of bad.
I mean, and everyone's playing Overwatch 2 right now. And so going back, I don't even want to go back to Overwatch 1. You know?
I know, can't imagine going Overwatch 1.
Let alone go compete in the tournament just to be able to, it's just weird. It's weird.
Yeah.
I'm curious how long the break is going to be between
that's true.
Betas.
Yeah, because if it's like, God, I can't imagine a situation that would smooth this over, to be honest, for an Overwatch division team. But yeah, it's awkward.
My lesson there is do your homework, kids, because I missed that one line in the press release there. Our first open division events of the year will be hosted on the current Overwatch Live service, which exactly Tikatee is kind of what you said afterwards. So I said it was starting on the right foot, and I'm definitely agreeing with you now, Tikatee. I want to walk that back right now and just say, that's a pretty clunky way to do it. It's not really, it's not ideal at all.
It's good that they're doing it in the first place.
Right.
It's good that they are doing it on Overwatch 2, but do all of it on Overwatch 2.
Exactly.
Yeah, it does seem weird not to be like, okay, we're just going to run open division during one of the betas.
Yeah.
It
depending on when the next beta is going to happen and all that.
Yeah, it's
like figure it out.
You're requiring these teams to compete on that doesn't fully translate. You know, it's going to feel so weird as a team because you can't even. There's not even any pros or anyone else to look up to playing Overwatch 1. You know, when you go back and play it, it's, I don't know,
well, they're the cream of the crop now, the open division teams.
There you go.
They're the best of the best.
And they're still scrimming. Like looking at the looking for scrim stuff, there's a lot of high yellow scrims on Overwatch 1.
Especially with this announcement, I imagine teams are going to be kicking it into high gear.
Yep.
But like that just as a player, that sucks. Like everyone is very like, this is really fun. We finally got new content. JK, go back to Overwatch 1.
Yeah.
Right.
Unlearn everything you just learned.
It is. unfortunate, but like you said, Tikatee, it is good to see that contenders in Open Division will be back, and that it is still being supported, even if it isn't in the most perfect way.
Mhm.
And with that, I'll leave it up to any of you three for any final thoughts, as we have covered everything that we wanted to. If there's anything we've missed or anything you'd like to mention, now is the time.
I just have one quick point on the this open division thing. I do appreciate the fact that they are doing something less than perfect, and which I feel like is a bit of a departure from how they've been treating stuff for the last few years. Like, yeah, it's not perfect, but waiting for
It's
something to be perfect, yeah, and I feel like they haven't been doing something.
Yeah, to be clear, this is like the first contenders announcement we've had this year, and the last thing we heard was no more. Ever since like Overwatch 2 was announced, like basically like, all right, maybe contenders will be Overwatch 1, maybe it'll be Overwatch 2, and now to finally have like some solidification of what the tournament structure is going to look like and stuff like that is definitely good for people to understand that bit of roadmap. My biggest thing with all of that is I would love to know that about all the future betas, about Overwatch 2's whole development cycle, which might be asking a bit much. I'm not trying to like drive down to where is it again? Where's the Blizzard HQ? In California. I'm not trying to drive down to their office and get the full tour or anything, but give us an idea of like what this year is going to look like. Obviously we have the Overwatch League, but how many betas are we expecting? How long are they going to last? How long between betas? Are we going to get to play for 3 weeks and then it's gone for 4 months? Like, what's happening here? I don't imagine it'll be that long. I'm imagining like a 1 or 2 week turnaround time between betas, but we've had no confirmation about that. And I'm still optimistic about Blizzard. I was extremely happy with the first beta release and how they're doing it and how they're basically making it open. I'm happy with the amount of communication they're doing with weekly communication now and the weekly patch balance in the beta itself. Everything's looking up for Overwatch development, which we haven't been able to say for a while. But there's still a lot of questions to be asked.
Yeah, I think it's like perfect, imperfect action in this case is better than perfect inaction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'll jump on the hopium train and say just closing thoughts in general for myself, in that I am optimistic about things in general involving Overwatch and Overwatch 2. I like the way that the game's headed. I like the way Overwatch League's headed. There's a lot of little things that have made things, you could say bad or whatever, the things we've talked about, the stream quality stuff, the weird rulings, the contender stuff, all that. But overall, like you said, it's for the first time in a long time, I'm hopeful that Overwatch can actually grow again.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very big thing. And I hope that for all the people that have been grinding Overwatch 1 for the past few years, I hope they feel the same way. I don't really agree with like that video game Donkey put out about, talking about how Overwatch is bad and all that kind of stuff, because I think there is hope for the people that have chosen this, Overwatch as their bread basket, as it were.
The little piece of the gaming sphere.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good spot to leave it. There is hope. Aero, I absolutely agree with you. So Aero, Ageless, Tikatee, thanks so much again for having the chat. We'll be back again next Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern time to do this all again on Recall. Check us out on Questline Esports tomorrow here on Twitch, as me and Ageless are going to be doing a cast of Scrim once again. And then Wednesday, we have some high-level VOD views as well with Tikatee and Aero. So a lot of content this week. So make sure you tune in for all that. Give us a follow if you haven't already. And for everyone here, I'm NewBeat saying thank you very much for watching, and we will see you again next week.